Alamo wasn't over the hill.
Here's Lewis getting away from the left jab, started to spin by Walcott. Walcott is gloved down by his side. Time running out in this round. Here's Lewis, a left jab, and the chin, and Lewis is down from a right cross to the chin. Walcott floored Lewis, who got up without any count. Lewis got up quickly. Here's Walcott driving a right to the chin. Again, Lewis has been on the floor. Time is running out in this round. Lewis shoots out a left jab. Walcott keeps moving from side to side. Takes two hard left jabs on the mouth by Lewis. Lewis found him with both of them. Then Walcott is back with a light left jab on the chin of Joe Lewis. Lewis coming in on Walcott again. Lewis dancing it a little bit now, coming in faster. Blocking a left foot at his chin by Walcott. 1 minute to go in the round as Walcott speeds it up. Shooting a left jab on the chin. And then taking a light left jab. He's trying to baffle Lewis. He's moving from side to side. Comes in with a left jab on the chin. A right cross to the jaw. A left hook to the mouth by Walcott. Another left hook on the chin by Jersey Joe Walcott. And that has brought the crowd up screaming. He really opened up that time. Lewis takes a left hook to the chin. And Lewis hits Walcott with a right to the jaw. Lewis hit him with a right. Drove another right. And Walcott is in trouble on the rope. Lewis throws him with a right to the jaw. A left hook to the head. Walcott takes a right and a left to the body. Lewis has him where he had him in round 9 before. And then Walcott fights back with a left and a right to the jaw. He misses the right. A left hook to the head. Lewis throws him with a right and a left to the jaw. And Walcott is down. Walcott is down. We're trying to pick up the count. We can't hear the count. Walcott is trying to get up. He's on his knees. I don't know. 9. No, it is all over.
Ah, Johnny, never fight Joe Lewis twice. The champion opened up. When he got ready, he said he was going to do it. Walcott tried to fight him, but the big man had too much.
Joe, when you knocked him down, did you think he'd get up?
No, man, I saw when I had him. I know when he went down, he couldn't get up. I hit him with 4 or 5 very good punches.
I thought you hit him with my left hook, Joe.
Well, man, I hit him with my right, too. Well, I'd like to say again that I retired. Tonight was my last fight. And thank you very much.
But Joe still drew crowds, even on the golf course.
I've been champion of the world for 11 years and 3 days. I defended my championship 25 times. I think I've been told to retire now.
What? Down. An aging Uncle Mike Jacobs was retiring too, ending the most significant partnership in boxing history. With Jacobs out of the picture, and with the backing of Jim Norris of Chicago, Joe named the 2 top contenders, Ezzard Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott, to fight for his vacated title, with Lewis himself as the new promoter. Divorced now from Marva Trotter, Joe hardly lacked for female companions, including the lovely Lena Horne, who became what Time magazine would call his great and good friend. He also kept busy with exhibition bouts, including one against Pat Valentino, before crowds that included his successor, Ezzard Charles. Joe made money, but not fast enough to satisfy the IRS, which was charging him $50,000 a year in interest alone, while the principal kept mounting up and up.
Joe, everyone in Chicago, everyone in the United States, and I guess everyone in the world wants to know, are you going to make a comeback? And did this fight tonight have any influence on your future plans? Or what are your future plans?
Well, I'm going to continue boxing them 10-round no decision fights right now. And after the first of the year, then I would really know what I'm going to do.
He had no choice but to come out of retirement at age 35 and challenge Ezzard Charles for the championship.
Ezzard Charles was a great fighter, very much underrated, never given the real credit due him. He was one of those black fighters who could do everything and anything in the ring.
Seconds out now as Ezzard Charles has his nose patched up by Ray Arcel. Joe Lewis.
What the public didn't know was that in his heart, Joe felt he wasn't ready for Charles. This would be his first real fight after a 2-year layoff, and he would have liked to wait at least until the end of the year to work himself into better shape. But money talked louder than Joe's professional qualms. An outdoor fight in Yankee Stadium had to be held no later than early fall, and Jim Norris had already counted the house. Ready or not, Joe was in there with a younger, faster, and at this stage, more highly skilled Ezra Charles, eager to prove to the world that he was a true champion and not the imposter some detractors claimed.
Left eye. Now Charles with a right hand under the heart.
For this fight, for the first time in his life, Joe had waited in his dressing room to be summoned to the ring, wishing he didn't have to go down. It was all I could do, he admitted later, not to ask my trainer to call it off.
As Charles waits for him out in the center of the ring here at Yankee Stadium, and we can see that there's not too much power in the knees of Ezra Charles now, but he's gained with 45 seconds, and a great era may be definitely coming to an end as Charles stays away, shoots his left hand in for the forward, tries to work on the midsection, but Joe Louis ties him up there with 30 seconds left.
Why? Why does this guy fight? Does he need the money that bad at this stage of his life? And that is the sad thing, to see a fellow who reaches his peak and then starts to go downhill, to try to keep on performing against younger, experienced fighters. And that's when you get hurt, because if you're the older fighter, your coordination is gone, your reflexes aren't as sharp, your ability to see the things that you ordinarily would be able to see and overcome. You can't fool Father Time and Mother Nature. It's absolutely impossible. And you can only go so far and then know when to quit.
Joe tried the beer business and a car dealership, but there was only one business he really knew, and so he stayed with it, figuring he could still lick run-of-the-mill heavyweights like Lee Savold and Cesar Brion, and maybe even fight his way back to a rematch with Ezra Charles. But that dream ended when Jersey Joe Walcott knocked out Charles. And now the only money fight left for the 37-year-old Joe Louis was with the young, undefeated, hungry white hope, Rocky Marciano, whose style and punching power were being compared, as Joe's once had been, to Jack Dempsey's.
Hello, boxing fans, wherever you may be, but especially to those in New England. I'm in good shape for this fight, and I hope I come through all right.
Hold it there, Rocky.
The straight left hand on the jaw of Marciano. Louis takes an overhand right to the chin. A solid punch and then a right to the body by Marciano. Louis backing away with that wide stance again, feigning the left hand. Marciano going into a crash. And Louis is down the left hip. Louis down the left hip. 3, 4. And Louis takes it out off 1, 7, 8. Louis is up with a count of 8. He was down. A clean left hook on the jaw. Here's Marciano missing it right over the head. A left hand, another right to the jaw. Left hook to the back by Marciano. Louis is holding on. He's in real trouble. Marciano has Louis holding him. Marciano misses the left. A short right to the jaw. Left hook to the mouth by Marciano. And Marciano is now with a left and a right to the jaw. He knows Louis with a right to the head. A left to the body. A left hook. Siders Louis. Louis is down again. Louis is down outside the roof. It's all over. Ruby Goldstein is stopping the fight. Rocky Marciano is the winner by a knockout. Joe Louis is done with fighting. Out of the rope, on his back. The doctor is over there. He was knocked down first with a left hook for an 8 count. Then Marciano got him against the rope. Louis fought back desperately, shook Marciano, then got nailed with 2 left hooks and a right hand, went out of the rope, staggered along him first, fell through him, and his ring career, one of the most sensational in boxing history, is over.
Another war now, over in Korea, and again the armed services thought that Joe's giving exhibitions in the Far East would help morale. Not that our government was doing much to help Joe's morale. It was nice to have a hero's welcome from our recent enemies, but inside his head an adding machine went clicking. $1 million in debt to the IRS, $100,000 a year in interest alone. He could still draw crowds to stadiums, even for matches with Army novices. But deep down, Joe had to be thinking, what do I do with the rest of my life? As if to symbolize the passing of the good old days, in 1953, Uncle Mike Jacobs was gone at the age of 72. Mike was no social reformer, but Joe would be forever grateful to him for opening the door to black champions 20 years earlier. Trying show business now, Joe did a turn with the timeless Nicholas brothers and singing star Dolores Parker. Trouble was hitting Joe in combinations. His beloved mama died, leaving him $600 that the IRS grabbed. Nor was his attorney able to stop them from moving in on his children's trust funds. A failed remarriage to Martha didn't help either. Life looked a little brighter when he met and married Rose Morgan, a successful beautician with 65 people on her payroll. With the visit of his children to join hers, things seemed happy on the surface. But Joe was an habitual night owl and Rose an early rising executive. So after only 18 months, they parted, and Joe resumed his bachelor ways. Joe Louis was a proud man, but he was also a desperate one. And when he got an offer to go on the wrestling circuit, he joined the carnival of the Muscle Boys in what might be called Requiem for a Heavyweight. For the most successful black athlete of all time, this was the bottom of the barrel. There were choreographed wins over professional wrestlers like Cowboy Rocky Lee, with Joe simulating heavy punches and following instructions to exult over his victories in a way he had always disdained in his years of dignity and glory. Ironically, it was Jersey Joe Walcott, his last serious challenger, who lifted Joe's arm in token of victory. But for even these hollow conquests, Joe paid dearly when the cowboy cracked one of his ribs, which in turn damaged his heart muscles. Small wonder that in these dark times, Joe turned to frequent fixes to make him feel he was once again heavyweight champion of the world.
I don't know. My mind hadn't been made up whether I would go back to wrestling or not. I know I would referee wrestling matches again, that I'm sure.
Broken in mind and body, ashamed of his false friends, but moved by some sense of what he'd once been, Joe renewed his acquaintance with a woman who stood for all the values he'd been running away from. The first black woman attorney in California, Martha Malone Jefferson, and the last Mrs. Lewis.
He seemed to have been quite at peace in Los Angeles. But then he'd go on the golf circuits, and he would have various appearances in different places at different times, which it suited me fine.
Spending days on the golf course seemed a healthy pastime, except for Joe's habit of gambling thousands of dollars on a game he never mastered quite as well as boxing.
Joe was a rather free-hearted person. He would give you his last dime. He might not have but $40 in his pocket, but if you came up and told him a hard luck story that you needed $40, Joe would give you the $40 and take a chance on getting him some more money from somewhere else. That's the way he was.
When Joe moved with Martha to their 10-room house in Las Vegas, one room was virtually a museum devoted to his trophies. The room was a haven to which Joe could return to rediscover who he really was. Not the recluse hiding from the world in self-degradation, but the proud champion, the role model for young blacks in the 30s, the 40s, and onward, with immortality assured both in boxing and in social history. A job at a London casino was Joe's next pit stop in his race to keep ahead of himself. He clowned with songstress Petula Clark and tried to get into the spirit of London nightlife. But maybe he had too much on his mind. Like the problem of his illegitimate children whom he loved. The same woman who bore Joe a child, and who, incidentally, he said, turned him on to cocaine, had 3 other children by other men. Incredibly, Martha and an aging Joe fighting his drug habit took them in, too. Martha had also taken on Joe's interminable battle with the IRS.
The penalties and the interest had grown to such an enormous amount, it could never be really paid off dollar for dollar. At one time, Joe was appearing here in Las Vegas with Pearl Bailey at the Flamingo. So they sent through a hold on the money that he was supposed to be paid. I said, if you take it, Joe isn't going to work. I said, he can eat, he can sleep. I'm working. So Joe just won't work. So what are you going to gain by it?
It was a shameful thing to see a man like him, great fighter, great human being, being humiliated and destroyed in this manner, because after all, when you owe Internal Revenue money, no matter what you have, they take away from you. And they took a lot away from Joe Louis.
But not even Martha could cope with the demons within.
The first thing that happened to Joe of significance was the fact of this paranoid condition, that he felt that people were after him and they were trying to put gas on him and they were trying to do various things. And as a result of that, he was committed to the hospital in Denver for psychiatric help. This was what was done so that Joe could get the help that he needed.
Sugar Ray Robinson and Max Schmeling were in Vegas to welcome Joe home from the hospital, along with actor Anthony Quinn and Billy Kahn. To Max and Joe, a cake decorated with a miniature boxing ring recalled to their amusement the famous shocker of long ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, the referee for the main event, the greatest. From Detroit, Michigan, the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis.
The crowd in the garden was cheering a man who had pulled himself up from the canvas again, as he had in his glory days against the Galentos and Waltots. The standing ovation was testimony to his toughest fight of all, against the invisible opponent of his later years, adversity, financial, physical, and psychic. After wandering through the economic desert for 30 years, at last Joe found an oasis and a steady job at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas.
Well, I'm a host. I shake hands, but I've been with the hotel 6 years. I'm enjoying my stay in with the hotel.
There were those who thought it demeaning for him to front for a garish gambling casino. But an easygoing, innately gracious Joe Louis liked his job and took it serious.
Would you be kind enough to invite two? I have two little granddaughters.
What do the people ask you when they shake hands to you?
Well, getting most of the questions you get that, dude, I think I could have beaten Ali. And that's my biggest, I get that question more than anything. But I enjoy talking to people.
And do you think if you meet Ali, if you fight Ali, who's going to win?
Well, I was with him in his camp, so I think he was a very good fighter.
He was now a fixture at Caesar's Palace, where the owners staked him money to gamble. His winnings he kept. His losses, and he was notoriously unlucky, they gladly swallowed. This was hardly a storybook ending for the most popular of all heavyweight champions, but he was enjoying the limelight and the attention of the famous who welcomed him back from his years of darkness. An old injury from the circus nights of wrestling required heart surgery, followed by a stroke that put Joe in a wheelchair. Fate had dealt him more than his share of losing hands, along with the winners his friends preferred to remember. Every man's life can be related to the four seasons: the spring of youthful promise, the summer of fulfillment, autumn, the beginning of the fall, and finally the bitter cold of winter. But the great ones get, and sometimes even live to enjoy, a second spring, when past glories are remembered and the whole life is brought back into focus. Even though he had to rely on the kindness and charity of friends rather than on the legitimate independence his earnings should have provided, still he was fortunate to have such friends, drawn to him not only for his power in the ring, but for his genuine dignity and integrity.
If you look at this crowd here today, this is just 1/10 of the people that want to be here. The people who love to know Joe Louis, the poor people around the world, the black and white, all kinds, they just couldn't get here. If you had something for Joe Louis, we could have the Superdome packed 5 times in New Orleans to help Joe Louis. 5 times you could fill the Superdome. That's how great he was.
I feel that if anybody can follow behind Joe Louis' step, they have accomplished something, they have achieved the goal. Just like the legend Muhammad Ali's done himself. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to be as half of a champion that Joe Louis was. And I feel that I've done a lot.
He was my idol, and we lived together in Detroit where I was born. I used to carry the bag for him down at Brewster Center. I had the idea maybe I wanted to be a fighter, but I wasn't sure yet. But after we moved to New York, then I got started doing it, and he was a big help to me.
He was probably my only hero, the one that really stood out. You know, I admire a lot.
From Jackie Robinson to Arthur Ashe and generations to come. Years before, sports writer Jimmy Cannon had written the epitaph that said it all. He's a credit to his race, the human race.